Welcome back to another edition of Check Call. Don't forget to subscribe to Check Call, the newsletter on FreightWaves.com if you haven't already. Today we welcome Mike Grabovica, co-founder and CEO of Birdseye Security. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing well today. This topic is not necessarily new to the show, but it is very relevant and timely, and that is kind of the evolution of cargo theft. But today we're really kind of honing in on that tech aspect of it, of how, the introduction of some technology really benefits and helps kind of reduce that cargo theft, or at least your exposure to it. Before we get too far into that, though, let's get some background on you and how you got started at Birdseye, or why you started Birdseye, I guess.
Cool. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm happy to share that. So a long time ago, I used to operate 5 retail outfits, and we sold cameras, internet, servers, all kinds of things, all the stuff that we still sell today. And we gave them to people, and they would take them to their businesses or their homes. They would install it to kind of solve their own problems. And through that process, I realized that we had our own problems as we were scaling and adding more retail outfits to oversee and manage. We seen that we had shrinkage, we were losing inventory, we could have squeezed more efficiency out of the operation, but we didn't have the budget to have a manager in every single store. So we installed cameras at each of the locations and basically just monitored what was going on. Right, you get some good data around how many customers came in, how long it took to approach them, how long the conversation was, and there's always a correlation between the number of minutes you spend with a customer and the likelihood that they will actually buy something. So we were taking that data and using it to make good business decisions. And then on the other side, it was really great to have to just kind of oversee the techs, make sure that the inventory stayed put. And so we thought, this is pretty cool. Maybe somebody would want this as a actual service. And a lot of people told me that I was absolutely crazy, that nobody would pay for that. But these were the early stages, like several decades ago, and they were all right. I would knock on doors and I would ask people if they would be interested in this. And like out of 100, like 99 would say, no, you're crazy. I'm not paying you to watch me. I can watch my own operation. So, and then we basically, there was like one customer, a trucker. He's like, no, I could use this. I'd like to sleep better at night. And we're like, great, first customers, this is awesome. And he said, but I'm still going to have my guard on site because he needs to let trucks in and out. And so we said, well, what do we got to do to, help you get rid of that guard or repurpose him? And he said, well, you have to find a way to get the trucks in and out and do his job. So we figured out how to do that. And then he still kept the guard. And we're like, well, why are you keeping the guard? He's like, well, he also makes sure that people do pre-trip and post-trip inspections, drivers. You're not really doing that for me, so I still need the guard because he does this when no one's around. So we thought, okay, well, let's put some speakers up. Let's just politely remind drivers to do their pre-trips and their post-trips, and then so on and so forth. I'll bore you the long story, but the customers basically told us what they needed for us to do in order for them to say, you know what, I don't need a security guard. I can repurpose that individual, have them do other value adds in our operation. So that was the kind of, natural evolution. And we continued scaling. And fast forward to today, we employ 500 people. We're across the continent. And we do about 1 million gate transactions per month. So it's been a really fun ride. And I've been super blessed to have a fantastic team that's been kind of rocking and rolling with me for quite some time now.
That is quite impressive to go from just kind of like okay, we've got one and we have to start somewhere, and just kind of tacking things on to then grow to obviously what you guys have now. That had to be really kind of cool to kind of at the beginning be kind of more or less on the ground saying, this is what we're doing. Okay, well, what else do you need? Because there's a lot of things that we just don't think about. If you're like, oh, we can come in and keep an eye on everything. Okay, well, like what else do they do? Those other duties as assigned are quite large. And so it's kind of nice to say, okay, well, what else, what can we fully take away from this person to free them up to do other more possibly more important things other than sitting there and babysitting a guard shack, because that is not necessarily the best use of someone's time.
Yeah, and I think um, if you don't pay attention to your customer, someone else will. I think it's just kind of that simple. I think that applies to a lot of things in life, you know. So yeah, we just asked a lot of questions, and we learned that in logistics specifically, it wasn't really security that we were selling. We're really selling a peace of mind and an efficient operation, because security is a byproduct of a well-run operation. So that if anything deviates outside of protocol, it's an automatic security threat. Once we kind of figure that out, we still kept the name security, because it is kind of like what you get out of an efficient operation. But we really started focusing on how to manage the risk within the yard, and how our customers could generate more revenue, how we can help them with those initiatives, how we can help them manage inventory, how can we help them with CTPAT, with PIP, with their insurance costs, loss prevention, and all of these other things. And but it was a lot of conversation, lot of time spent at the yard, and we still do that today. We have a huge passion for it. We love it. It's fun solving problems, and it's fun solving problems with your customer. They know what they want. We just have to tell them kind of how to get there more efficiently. So that's where we come in.
I think that you bring up a really interesting part with the excuse me, with the the security is a kind of a byproduct of very well run organization and strong processes and procedures. And that's something that I think a lot of people don't understand or don't necessarily kind of put together, that if you have, let's say you have a driver coming in to check in for a load, and you like my paperwork on this load says it's supposed to be picked up by John with ABC trucking at like between 12 and 1. Okay, great. It's 12. Maybe someone named Jake comes with BCA trucking and they have this. And then it's like, well, whoa, this isn't the right information. So like, are you actually John? Like, what is that? It kind of immediately throws a red flag if it's not verified and it's not following those processes. Because if everything's going well and, you have the correct carrier come in at the right time with the right information and the right verification things, it does take a little bit more time on the dock and during check-in to just verify all these other things. And I know on the front end, when you're sitting there booking those loads, sometimes carriers are a little more, some of them aren't as willing to give you their driver's entire life story. But they're still good carriers. It's just a matter of finding that balance of not being too intrusive, but also still having enough personal verifiable information that I can give to those that are filling the trucks and working in the warehouse, to make sure that we are loading the correct things and we're not opening ourselves up to any of those security risks, or someone just saying, I'm here to pick up a load. Okay, which one? Like, come on, be a little bit better.
Yeah. No, 100%. I think you can be as secure as you're willing to inconvenience someone, right? And imagine going to an airport and there was no security check. Yes, it's an inconvenience, but it's just something that you got to do, right? So um, I think that the goal with technology is to just speed that process up. How do you make it faster? How do you do it more accurately? And how do you do it faster?
So
Yeah,
when it comes to doing it faster, it's because obviously cargo theft is not going away. It's a huge problem for the industry. Like it seems to not really necessarily care what product, what commodity, anything. It doesn't necessarily care if it's on the front end, or it's on the front end of picking up loads, or on the back end of freight payment fraud. Like it's everywhere. And so when it comes to security, obviously it's more than just like, okay, we need a gate. Like we need a locked gate that you have to have a guard or a Birdseye to let you in. It's a lot more than that. So what kind of is that full holistic approach to that comprehensive security plan?
yeah. So there's three main pillars of a well-run operation in a logistics setting. So you got to have the gate, to your point. Imagine not having a front door to your house. There's a higher likelihood that someone might just come in uninvited, right? So you got to have a front door to your house or a gate at your facility. And unfortunately, like almost probably 50% of all the logistics centers across North America actually don't have a gate. And if you ask them why, they're like, honestly, it's really expensive, and my lease is for X amount of time, and I don't know if I want to spend that money. And my operation is changing. So once we started including the gate as part of our service, our sales started actually going up. So you got to have a gate, but at that gate, you got to do what a human would do. And what would a proper security check look like on the way into the facility? Is you got to do it like a 360 around the equipment, look for damages. Are the tires low? Is the windshield cracked? Is the tail light out? Have a little chat with the driver, make sure they're not intoxicated, check their ID, check the paperwork, do a three-way, four-way, maybe a five-way match, just to make sure that the right person is carrying the right load, etc. So with technology, you can do all of that very quickly because you can strategically position cameras to kind of do all of that in real time with AI, with human oversight, of course, somebody that's professionally trained to do that. So gate's one major pillar. Pillar is the perimeter is also extremely important because what we're finding recently in our experience is you'll have like little mini gangs of like 5, 6 people, and they'll just rush the yard, right? And they'll just cause a mess. Maybe sometimes they don't steal something, but they'll cut a whole bunch of seals. And if you cut the seal, you bought the load, unfortunately. So sometimes people just do silly stuff. They light trailers on fire, So it's good to have a fence, but if you can't afford a fence, then maybe at least get some really great cameras that are watched in real time with humans or AI. So that way, if you do see someone attempting to trespass, you can voice them down in real time using loudspeakers and say, hey, you in the white shirt, get out of here. I got a picture of you. I'm calling the police. And if you do call the police in those situations, they tend to react relatively quickly because it's treated priority one, crime in progress. So response time is really good. So that's the second pillar. And then the third one is just yard operations. And yard operations is a little bit about security, but it's more about the operation itself. So if people are parking where they're supposed to park, people aren't speeding in the yard, they're not using a handheld device when they're driving the truck. If they're doing, 3 points of contact, they're wearing their safety vest, they're not wearing slippers in the yard, bunch of jazz like that. If everyone's doing that and you're observing it, anything that's kind of outside of that, you're like, wait a second, why are they doing that? That's kind of suspicious. So that's really difficult to do because you have to know the operation really well, and you have to really understand how that facility operates. But if you can hit those three, it's as good as you're going to get when it comes to security, right? And everyone's got different budgets, so maybe they can do one of three, some can do two of three, some can do 3 of 3. So it really depends on the size of the facility and the budget of the carrier.
I feel like almost everyone should be able to do one of 3, especially when it comes to like operational processes and just the stuff that you do in your day to day. That's not typically stuff that's going to have a huge cost associated with it because it might just be, we're adding another level of identity verification for a driver or a carrier or anyone who shows up. Like that's just kind of, in my opinion, I mean, I might be wrong, but in my opinion, that's kind of just like a baseline level of operations. Like it's just kind of having care and investing in your product. But I don't think that those are things that don't typically come with like a multi-million-dollar price tag investment of just simple processes to make sure that you are verifying things and that everyone kind of knows what's up. It might be some lost hours for training, like pull people for an hour at a time over the course of a couple months and have some retrainings. But to me, that's almost the cost of doing business instead of, maybe investing in state of the art secure. Like if you don't have the money to invest in a comprehensive security system, you have to have the time to dedicate to something, because doing nothing is literally just inviting someone to come steal from you.
Yes, you're 100% right. And I think the challenge that carriers have is budget at the end of the day, honestly. And it's hard getting great drivers. The industry's in their 28th month recession so far, one of the longest recessions in many decades. So I think, but the other piece to that is if you can't measure it, you can't really control it. I'm sure you've heard of that old saying. It's so true, right? So if you can measure, for example, how many times John Smith did his post-trip inspection when he entered your yard, and you can have a chat with him and say, hey, you know what, like, great job. You do it like 50% of the time. But guess what? Once your keys got handed over, the next driver took the truck. The other 50% of the time, we had a lot of risk out on the road, right? So can we bring that up to like 100% ideally, right? But if you can measure this, it really, really helps. Same thing with safety vests and all these things. So I think having, and there's a lot of great ways to package the expensive technology into a comprehensive service, like, and you can have the cameras and all of this stuff, all this fancy stuff for a lot less than the cost of a guard. So it's actually gotten pretty cheap. But if you have real data that you can share with your safety team, with your ops team about how things work, and you have a benchmark, you have a place to start with, and then you can have conversations with people, like real conversations. You can say, hey, here's a video of you doing XYZ. Here's an opportunity for you to do it this way. You'll be safer, and we'll all benefit as a result. Everyone should come home safely to their families, and our job as carriers and vendors like us is to help with that initiative. So I think I'm a really big promoter of KPIs, measuring everything as much as you can, and then looking at that data week over week, month over month, and saying how we improved. And insurance companies love it. They love it. If you're an insurer, you come to my yard and I'm like, take a look. Here's where we were. Here's where we are. Here's where we're going. Here's what we're doing. You're going to say, you know what? I think you're managing your risk pretty well. If you're a customer and you come to my yard and I do the same thing, you walk in and you hear this Dolby Digital surround sound thing. Good afternoon. Welcome to the yard, right? And say, hey, look, we could take on these higher value loads, which will lead to more income generation. If I have some spare capacity in my yard, maybe I'm not at 100% occupancy and there's 30 spots in my yard left. And I'm like, hey, come to my yard, park your trailers here, generate some extra income. You're going to say, well, what kind of security do you have? I'm going to say, I can't wait to show you this, right? So you get what you pay for, but honestly, technology's come down in price so much. Who would have thought the smartphone would cost what it does today and what it could do for you? And that's no different with what we're doing. It's the cost is going down, and you're getting 10x the value of what you would out of what's been traditionally done to do all of the above.
The thing that you brought up about insurance companies is incredibly important, because I know that insurance is one of the top concerns and one of the top costs for carriers. Is that right up there with fuel and maintenance? But if you can say, hey, this is what we're doing to mitigate our risk and to mitigate these things happening, that's all that insurance companies are about. They want to see everything that you're doing, so that way the likelihood of them having to pay out a claim is lower. They love data. They love analytics. If you can say it used to be this, now it's this because of these things that we've implemented, and this is how we're going to continue, they will be much more apt to not raise your rate as aggressively. I'm not going to say they're going to give you a reduction, because I don't think insurance companies are capable of that. But they will be less likely to increase it, because it's just all about that exposure. When it comes, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead.
I was going to say, when it comes to 3PLs and freight brokers and those and shippers that might not manage their own fleet. Like if they are just kind of working at the mercy of what their partners have, how do you suggest they kind of tackle this as like a group project basically? So if you have a shipper that uses a 3PL for managed transportation services that then uses different carriers, there's not really like one central person that is saying, I'm taking ownership of this. Like, how do you kind of navigate that situation?
It's kind of like you do what's in it, it's everyone works together, but they also compete against each other. That's what's really fun and interesting about the logistics industry. But you can only do what's in your control, and have a list of standards and that folks have to oblige by if they want to do business with you. So you can't control what somebody does down the street, like no control over it. But what you could always do is say, look, if you're, for example, coming to pick up a load here, here are my procedures. Here are the list of tasks that we are going to have to go through. Here's the list of checks and balances that we have to agree on. Otherwise, I won't do business with you. Now, again, 27-month recession in trucking, people are like, let's cut this list in half, right? Understandable. It's tough out there, but it's much tougher when you lose loads, because we've seen it all too many times where we get a call, but it's kind of like maybe too late. They can't get insurance anymore, or they lost their key customers or their key vendors, or their key strategic partner, or they were kicked out of the captive group that they were in, or whatever, right? And we're like, you should have called us a little bit sooner, So I think you can't change the world, but you can change yourself. If you take care of the inside, the outside takes care of itself. I mean, sorry to use that analogy, but it applies to your operation as well.
That's a really interesting point, because it's kind of like when you onboard a new carrier, right? If you're a freight broker or a shipper, you're onboarding a carrier and you have the list of requirements that these carriers have to meet for you to do business with them. And in theory, you should have that for all of your other vendors as well. Things that are a must have, a non-negotiable, and then the nice to haves. Because honestly, at some point in time, you do have to be realistic. You can't expect everyone to have cutting edge, top of the line technology, because like you said, it's a long freight recession. The budgets aren't there, So you have to say, okay, well, do they at least have some baseline level of security? Do they have some kind of verification tool? Do they have these what we consider baseline items? And I think that's where you really just have to know what you aren't willing to compromise on as an organization.
Yeah, agreed. And I think that applies to like all businesses, just, even outside of trucking. This applies to all the vendors out there. I remember during the early days of our business, we would do business with like anyone. I'm ashamed to admit it, but we just needed a customer, somebody that would pay for our service just to keep the lights on, and then through time, you're like, this policy's got to get changed, because we can't do this, right? So you got to have a set of your own core values. And in a perfect world, or it takes time to get there. There's no doubt, where you can have the luxury of picking your customers. But if you have your own set of core values, then that's hopefully you find a match with customers and with vendors, right? So my son's going to grade 9. He's going to a new school in September. And he's like, am I going to make friends? And he's not really saying it as much as we're noticing it on him. And we're kind of like, don't worry about that. What are your core values? Like, what matters to you? And find friends that fit that, So it's just like simple rules for life that honestly can be just applied to just about anything, right?
I like that. Is if you do what you do best and be who you are, you'll find the right customers, the right people, the right everything to kind of round everything out.
And that's how we ended up just being in logistics, right? So we dabbled in these other industries, and we found that we were really good at logistics. So we did parks and rec, we did multi-residential, we did all kinds of different verticals that we were serving. And we're like, we can't be all things to everybody. Let's just get really good at managing the gate and logistics facility, complex protocols, perimeter and yard, like we chatted about earlier. And let's just get really, really good at that. Let's get better every day. And then somebody will appreciate it and somebody will not. But you can't be all things to everyone.
Exactly. Speaking of being all things, Mike, there's a question that we've been asking people who come on the show, and it could be the hardest question that you're asked today. If you could build a house out of any type of food, what would it be?
I honestly do not know. So here's what I would do. I would ask my son and my daughter and my wife to agree on something, and then daddy will go and make it. And then everyone's happy.
I like that plan. I like that plan. That's also could be a really interesting house. Like if you have someone that's like, I want waffles, and another one's like, I want pizza. You could have like 5 different kind of foods within your house.
Yeah. So you don't have to have one house made out of chocolate, for example, or, whatever. Everybody can have what they want. Right. And I'll just be happy to see them get, eat the house, I guess. I'll just, I'll sit there and I'll just watch and just nod my head and say, my gosh, first world problems.
I like that. I like that a lot. So if anyone has any recommendations for pitches for what your house should be, or if they have any questions about, how to improve their security within their organization, where can they find you outside the show?
Probably, all the online stuff. So, like website, LinkedIn. It's so easy to find everyone everywhere these days, so if you really want to chat, like I'm sure you'll find us and we'll be happy to help you.
I absolutely love that. You guys heard it. Just start trying to find Mike the best way that you can, or most creative way. But please don't be weird and like show up at his house.
It may not be made out of the material or the food that you want to eat. So
there you go. There you go.
Everyone, right?
All right, Mike, thank you so much for joining us today.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much for the opportunity to chat with you.
You can find Check All the Podcast anywhere you get your podcasts, like Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Don't forget to check out all the other incredible FreightWaves shows, and don't forget to subscribe to the newsletter on freightwaves.com/checkcall. See you on the internet.